The hure is an agreed-upon legal system used by Somalis. It is similar to the Old English common law. Unlike most states on the planet, Somalis regard the law and the state as two separate entities, and view state law that conflicts with the hure as illegitimate. The hure defines ownership, and so there is an intersubjective consensus in Somalia as to what constitutes ownership independent of any state. The hure focuses on restitution to the victim of a crime, not necessarily punishment of the criminal, and no religious or political leader may become a judge, according to the hure. The hure also unambiguously opposes taxation as a clear violation of property rights. Thus, all states that have imposed taxation in Somalia are in violation to the nominal intersubjective consensus, the hure. The dia defines rules regarding punishment, and Sharia law is typically used for matters of inheritance. Courts in Somalia can be Islamic or clan courts, which are paid for by donations of successful businessmen, similar to how companies in the West host spectacles as a form of free advertising. A businessman can donate to a private court, and he gets to go around saying, "Look, I donated to a private court. Look how generous I am. Come to my store." Most Somalis view taxation as both immoral and illegal, though have submitted themselves to states. Italy established a state in Somalia in 1927 and then lost the area to the British in 1943. The area was transferred back to the Italian state in 1950, which was then obligated to transfer the area to a new Somali state in 1960. In 1969, there was a coup in Mogadishu, which led to the establishment of the Supreme Revolutionary Council, and Siad Barre declared Somalia a socialist state. Barre denounced all forms of clanism, which had been key to Somali organization and was how things had been done for thousands of years in Somalia. Barre's economic and foreign policies were oh so predictably disastrous. He attempted to implement what he called scientific socialism, which led to a brutal oppression of the clan structure and a general economic stagnation. Political opponents were subject to killings, tortures, rapes, forced reallocation, etc. Only one newspaper was allowed in Somalia, and TV and radio were completely censored by the state. Gossip was illegal, and many forms of association were punished by death. The state was also one of the most corrupt on the planet, embezzling funds, stripping assets of firms, and generally behaving in the way those with a total monopoly tend to behave. Totally desensitized to the misallocation of resources, they misallocated as much as could be done to support their individualistic ends. Land was nationalized in 1975 in Somalia, and all told, manufacturing was only running at around 20% capacity. In the 1980s, when Barre's projects were all going bankrupt, he turned to the printing presses, and the result was predictably hyperinflation, about 100% inflation a year from 1983 to 1991. The result was that Somalis couldn't calculate or efficiently distribute resources because the monetary unit was unstable. That is, prices couldn't be calculated by individual Somalis, and the result was chaos and deracination. This is all standard totalitarian stuff. In the 1980s, 100% of Somalia's development budget and 50% of the standard budget was funded through foreign aid, and so we can thank foreign states for enabling Barre. In 1987, over 70% of Somalia's operating budget was financed by foreign aid. In 1989, less than 1% of Somali government spending was on economic and social services, while military and administration accounted for 90% of government expenditures. Barre aligned with the Soviet Union, fought a war with Ethiopia, which adopted similar Marxist policies, and in 1977 and 1978 fought a war with Ethiopia over an area called Ogaden. The Barre government was so incompetent and corrupt that in 1991 there was another coup in Mogadishu led by the United Somali Congress, and that year 400,000 Somali refugees in Ethiopia returned to Somalia. According to Peter Lesson, Somalia has improved in 15 of 18 indicators regarding the standard of living that he measured, and here is that table. Lesson wisely put a question mark instead of stating whether or not the situation had improved in matters of GDP. In a centrally planned economy, planners can just assign values to anything. Decoupling from the market decouples from the price system, and it is impossible to assign values to state programs in the same way the prices of things emerge on a free market. For example, the state may spend $1 million on a state school, but have $1 million worth of services been rendered? Almost certainly not, but it will be reported as $1 million in GDP. Also, central planners tend to over-report output. And while the GDP stats are lower, individual citizens are consuming much more in the stateless society. Also keep in mind that much of the GDP back then was military spending, and even if the total value of that which was produced is less than 1991, Somali citizens are apparently better off instead of the militarists. Education during the state's reign in Somalia was funded primarily through foreign aid, and so the collapse of education dovetailing with the collapse of the state could have been expected. Apparently, education simply is not a worthwhile investment for most Somalis, at least today, and so the decline in education spending can be classified as a reallocation of resources to more productive ends. Welfare in Somalia is provided by social insurance funded from abroad, with remittances averaging $4,170 per household, and there's also an extensive clan-based system. Medical services are provided just like any other service on a private basis, and welfare is not doled out in kind, but is just a money transfer. That is, if you're poor, they'll just give you some money, as one would expect on a free market. That said, there are a few extremely weak governments in Somalia funded by foreign aid. This is the Transitional Federal Government, the Puntland Government, and the Galmudug Government. However, when researching the Somali economy, I found the activities of these governments to be rarely mentioned. They are mentioned more in matters of war, which suggests to me that the primary activity of these governments is waging war with foreign aid money. Also, the roads in Somalia have apparently been seized by various clans who charge tolls, and if one wishes to live in Somalia, he typically has to pay a warlord 5 to 10% of his income for protection. And this is significantly less than the tax rates of Western states, and one can move from area to area to pick and choose warlords in a way that states simply do not allow. I suspect that these fees would not be as high if there were not so much state involvement in the area. That is, if there were not wars going on in the background. Since 2006, warring has spiked, and there has been a tangled mishmash of forces attempting to oppose the state in Somalia, and of course none of them has been able to do so. The two main factions in the war are the Islamic Courts Union and various Islamists. These are people who want to impose Sharia law and make Somalia an Islamic state. They are backed by insane fundamentalists within and without Somalia. And the Transitional Federal Government, an agency contrived by the UN, supported by the US, the UN, Ethiopia, Puntland, and Galmudug. The mainstream media will try to paint these guys as the good guys. There are also various clans running around Somalia, and these clans can be said to be the organic form of social organization in Somalia. When a state is unable to claim an area, the clan just asserts themselves. They are the default, so to speak, and they fall back onto the Zir. These are the good guys. These are the guys that the anti-statists should support. I must admit that I don't take much interest in who invaded what, where, and when around Somalia. The Islamists and the secular statists want to dominate Somalia, and the various clans just want to do their own thing with their own property. Violence in Somalia today is grossly exaggerated and focuses primarily on Mogadishu as opposed to the rural areas, which never depended on state institutions in the first place, and to whom the collapse of the Bari regime simply means less taxes and less murder-rape raids. From July 20th, 2006 to July 15th, 2009, there have been an estimated 25,403 combat deaths. Of these, 16,724 are purported to be civilians, and this works out to about 5,575 civilian combat deaths per year. There are approximately 139,560 total deaths in Somalia per year, or about 18 per 1,000 people, as of the most recent data in August 2009. This works out to about 4% of all civilian deaths in Somalia being caused by combat during the civil war that started in 2006. From what I've heard, there has not been significant reduction in capital or general economic growth following the spike in combat. Now, on the matter of the Somali pirates. The Somali pirates are exploiting naval gun control laws. Large supertankers could be fitted with howitzers and an array of weaponry on a free market. This would make sense given the value of their cargo. States can end piracy by just allowing supertankers to carry howitzers. So there's nothing wrong with the Somalis in this regard. They're just exploiting statist gun control laws. The problem is with the states who dangerously disarm their citizens. And if Somalia really ever does decline, in a real major way, This is not an argument against a stateless society any more than monarchies invading democracies is an argument against democracy. Now, there are definitely many arguments against democracy, to be sure, but losing a war to a superior invader from a more established and settled state is not an argument against a political idea.